All right, we are live in front of the bookshelf, which means it's time for another book recommendation. Yeah, this one's going to be perfectly fine. This is Dragons of Deceit, the first of the new Dragonlance novels. Weiss and Hickman do a great job of this one. I actually, believe it or not, went into this one thinking I wouldn't like it, just because it was a new D&D novel, and I'm always pessimistic about new Wizards of the Coast stuff, but the authors did a great job, and I ended up really liking the main character and the story as it evolved. So there's my recommendation for the week. 5 out of 5 stars. Give it a try. Anyway, in today's video, I'd like to sit back in my non-squeaky chair, relax, and talk to you guys about interests, fandom, and your changing likes and dislikes over time, because if you're young enough, you probably won't believe me. And if you're old enough, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. But as you grow through life, as you age and experience things and get out there and try more things and get involved in different franchises, different hobbies, different collectibles, etc., you're going to find, more often than not, that what you're interested in will change with time, and you're not always necessarily going to be a fan of the things you like now. It's just a fact of life that as we grow and mature and go through life, our interests, the things we value, the things we like, they'll change with time. Some things will be very static. You know, when I was a teenager, I was super into card games. Here I am as definitely not a teenager, and I'm still very much into card games. When I was a teenager, I was into anime. Now I'm very much into anime. However, I'm not into the same anime I was when I was a kid, or at least not most of them. My interests have definitely changed over time. The things that I value in storytelling has changed over time. And sometimes it could be because your tastes have changed. And that's fine. And sometimes it could be because what you like has changed. And if that happens, it's fine too. You should never feel like it's a negative thing to fall out of love with something, either because your tastes have changed or its qualities have changed. I'm going to give you guys 2 great examples, okay? So, do I still? Yes, okay, cool. I used to fucking love Naruto when I was like in middle school and high school. Okay, Naruto was one of like 4 anime that I watched all the time. Naruto, Dragon Ball Z, Yu-Gi-Oh, of course, was up there. And then, of course, Ghost in the Shell, which was my favorite forever. And when I was younger, there were things I didn't like about Naruto. There were characters I certainly didn't like. But as I grew older, after the series finished, and as my taste in anime changed, I found myself really fucking hating Naruto. Like, genuinely hating Naruto. Nothing about Naruto changed. My tastes changed, and as I looked back at Naruto from an objective story standpoint, I found that it was just not the kind of story I would actually enjoy now as an adult. And that's fine. You know, another example is Magic the Gathering. I had loved Magic the Gathering for 2014-ish to, let's say, 2020, 2022, maybe something like that. And around that point is when I started falling out of love with Magic because of the changes to the story, the changes to a lot of the formats at the time, Wizards' introduction of Universes Beyond, and nowadays I would go as far as to say, as a fan of card games, I actually really hate Magic the Gathering now. And that's not because my tastes have changed, it's because Magic itself has changed very drastically from the game I had fallen in love with back when I had fallen out of love with Yu-Gi-Oh! Which brings me to my third point. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is another game that is another thing that I'd fallen out of love with. I had been playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Since the beginning. Okay? When Starter Deck Yu-Gi and Starter Deck Kaiba came out, I was in summer camp when those 2 products dropped. And everybody at the camp, every boy at that summer camp, we were all playing Yu-Gi-Oh! We were all just smashing our monsters into each other, trying to pull out our blue eyes and dark magicians the fastest to get a quick win, right? I've been playing Yu-Gi-Oh since the beginning, and I had stuck with that game almost religiously up until the end of the XYZ era, up to the end of up until the introduction of pendulum summons, basically, when I had felt that the power creep and the absurdity of the rules had finally gone too far. I had started to fall out of love during the synchro era, but it wasn't until pendulums came along and completely rewrote how the game worked that I was like, okay, no, 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 that's enough. Too much for me. I moved on, eventually got into Magic the Gathering, and that brings us forward to today. But here's the thing. A few years ago, I got back into Yu-Gi-Oh! Like really hardcore. There is another YouTuber out there somewhere. Something's going on outside. There's another YouTuber here called Strictly Sealed, and he was making a bunch of content. There's another content creator called Ruxin or Rushin. I have no idea how it's pronounced. And I was watching a bunch of their videos. I don't remember why I started watching their videos, but they were showcasing these old cards that I remember. I used to love these cards, and those two channels plus a few other channels I was watching at the time, they got me back into Yu-Gi-Oh! Not just as someone who buys and sells it, but as someone who actually holds on to some Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards to collect them. And of course, the big thought I had at the time is, man, I really should not have sold and gotten rid of all of my old Yu-Gi-Oh cards back when I had closed up shop way back in the day. I should have held on to those because, man, I would have had quite the collection these days. Which brings me to the point of my video. Sometimes you're going to fall out of love with something you really like, something that you have a nice collection for, or maybe something that was at one point really really close to your heart, and that's fine. You can fall out of love with things all the time. Like I said, you're gonna change as you grow up. But sometimes falling out of love with something is temporary. Sometimes you might come back to what you enjoyed, and it could be 6 months later. Uh, you could just be burnt out of Yu-Gi-Oh or Pokemon or One Piece or Magic the Gathering, right? And you could just 6 months later, you want to get back into it. You put your deck up on a shelf for a bit, and now you're playing it all the time again. Or sometimes it could be over a decade later, and you just kind of bemoan, "Oh man, I really should not have gotten rid of those cards. Oh, it's awful, awful." And there's really nothing you can do about that. But just be aware when you make that change, when you make that decision to fully drop out of something, to sell your collection, or to um, get rid of all your books of a certain series, or get rid of your DVDs, or whatever it is. Think to yourself, is this because my tastes have changed and I know I won't like this again? Or is it because this thing has changed and I'm not looking forward to any more of it going forward? Because if you're getting out of something, if you're getting out of an IP or a collectible or a game or whatever, because your tastes have changed, well, there's a decent chance, or at least from my experience, there's a decent chance that you're probably not going to go back to that later on in life. Like when I was a kid, I was really into Kids Next Door and Naruto and what's some other ones that I used to really like? DC Comics. Nah, I suppose that's more of a big change thing. I don't know. There's a bunch of like toys I played with when I was a kid that I probably wouldn't play with as an adult. There's no cartoons from when I was a kid. There's no TV shows from when I was a kid. Like I'm not going to be going back to Buffy. So like my tastes have changed. I'm not going back to those. But for things like Yu-Gi-Oh or Magic, I fell out of love with those because, in my opinion, those things changed. Yu-Gi-Oh changed. Magic changed. And I lost interest in what it had become. But that doesn't mean that I would always lose interest in what it was. I got rid of all my Yu-Gi-Oh stuff, and here I am 10 years later wishing that I had kept a hold of those things, those original cards that I was in love with in the first place. If I got rid of all my Magic cards today, all the ones on my personal deck and stuff, I almost guarantee that 10 years from now, I would be like, I should have just held on to those cards. I shouldn't have gotten rid of the Queen, the Silver Queen, my dual lands, etc., because I would feel super beat up about it. And maybe it wouldn't even be 10 years from now. It could be 6 months from now because maybe I could just feel nostalgic. And that's just the thing, if you're feeling like, my piece of advice, anyway, for this situation, if you're feeling like you've finding yourself falling out of love with something, you're not all that interested in it. My piece of advice is something I've been telling a lot of people these days is take what you got, take what you are considering getting rid of, And unless you need the money, because, I'll totally understand it that way. Unless you need it for bills or whatever, take your collection, put it in a box, put it in a closet, forget about it for a few months. Come back to it in a few months. See if you still feel like getting rid of it. If you do, if 6 months passes, you pull that stuff out of the closet and you find yourself feeling no emotional attachment to it, maybe you're getting rid of it because your tastes have genuinely changed. But if you pull that stuff out of the closet and you look through those cards or comics or video games or whatever it is you're getting out of, and you find yourself like you find your heartstrings being pulled, you find yourself still being attached to that stuff, well, maybe it's because those things changed and you're not fully ready to let them go yet. I know that hoarder mentality is definitely something to worry about. I definitely have to worry about it from time to time. But it's one thing to part ways with the things you enjoy, the things you genuinely enjoy. And another thing to just move on in life, which is totally different. Getting rid of things you no longer enjoy, it's just natural, and I think it's always a smart thing. Getting rid of the things that bring you happiness, sure, materialism and all that jazz, I understand the spiritual argument there, but at the end of the day, I suppose what I'm really trying to say is just like you should be careful and thoughtful when deciding what to purchase, you should also be careful and thoughtful when deciding what to get rid of. That's all. Anyway, thank you for watching this video to this point. Please like, share, subscribe, leave a comment down below if you agree with me, disagree with me, or think that you would like to hear another book recommendation. I have got loads to talk about at some point. Anyway, check out the Discord, check out the Patreon. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.